Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host Bill Whittle here for some unprecedented, unbelievable four in a row. Is that right? This is four in a row. I'm probably gonna have to start the show again because it looks like everything's working normally, uh, and we don't want that to happen. So, hope everybody's doing well. It was a big enjoyment of watching Rachel Maddow practically weeping. Um, so anyway, I just checking the Facebook page, and Mick Witensky says this is the first post of yours I've seen in months, maybe a year, on my news feed. Shame on that. Shame that censorship is being allowed by Facebook. Yeah, how about that, huh? We post 3, 4 things a day, and this is the first one he gets. You know, every time I run into this, it just makes me think, you know, what are you so afraid of? I mean, I know what they're afraid of, but it seems to me that it just seems to me like how can you admit that? This is just I don't know. Sometimes I just don't understand how people do this, how they can live with that kind of you know, philosophy. Now I'm looking off to the side here because I'm trying to see about one picture. Hey, there's no, that's not it. I'm not going to look forever. I'm just trying to see if I have some visual illustrations because I had a little thought about what I might talk about before we get rolling tonight. And guess what? It's not going to be a short show. It's going to run 3.5 hours. Okay, got to go. Thanks for joining us tonight here on the Stratosphere Lounge. Let me try one more thing here. Hang on, folks. You know, if you're not wandering and you know, blabbing about nothing, you probably got the wrong show. Where is this thing? Do I have it? Do I have it? Do I have it? I don't want to go digging for it. Deep. I don't think so. Yes. Well, not the one I had in mind, but that'll do. Hang on. Boy, this is gonna take guts to show this. I gotta tell you. One more. So anyway, yeah, here we go. So here's what I thought I'd just be chatting about. I was looking at the music list I was playing on the way in, just the music I have on my iPhone, and I really have some very weird stuff on that thing. Some of it you've heard here, and others of it not. But it occurred to me that there's just a crazy bunch of stuff on there. And so I thought I would talk a little bit about where I got some of this, virtually all of this musical exposure, because I wouldn't call myself a music guy by any means. So allow me to retort. All right, here's the part I told you is going to take some real guts on my part, but I'm going to do it anyway. So here's me where and when I learned how to do all this stuff. Now this is probably 4 or 5 years after I got there, but anyway, here we go. Oop. I actually want to put this on a different scene, don't I? Yes, I do, because because now, go away. Here we go. Yep, you, vamos. Yes. So here's what I'm. Come on. So here's what I'm going to show you here. Go. Yes. Go. Okay. Let me put that on a brand new special edition page here, so that we don't have to go through this again. All right. So scene 2. And I know you can hear me. And here it comes. And now we're zooming it in to a manageable size. Come on, baby. Come on, you miserable. There we go. Okay, so I look like Sir Elton John. I actually do look a bit like Sir Elton John. I look like Sir Elton John because of the glasses. yeah, that's definitely sort of me. After I'd been there, I want to say I'm probably 15 or 16 when this was done, and the stuff that, by the time I was this age with that. And by the way, I wish you could see this in color, because that Filthy Blazer is like electric blue and made out of triple knit polyester, which is the best kind of polyester. It's just pretty shocking. But the nice thing about working in the dark is you don't have to worry so much about those things. So I am, I can't find it. I'm not gonna just waste the whole time looking for it. Anyway, there's pictures of me when I was there, I was much younger, and then I will throw up one more here, because I'll just tell you a little bit about the Planetarium days. And here we go. No. Maybe do you want your own special scene, I reckon? There we go. So this is a little closer to when I got there. That's me on the left. And the guy looking at the camera is Doug Gagan, who passed away recently, I'm sorry to say. And who was a very interesting guy. He was the best console operator I ever saw. We did a show. All these shows were done live. You can see from the picture on the right, the Planetarium console there. That's the pointer that's sitting there with the kind of coil around it. So Doug had his ups and downs. One of his downs was, those polyester pants, which generated enough static electricity so that planes had to be specially grounded when he went aboard. But that's Doug. He's the best console operator I've ever seen. And the guy with the sunglasses turning the other way is my friend Phil Trick. I've said many times is the source of virtually all of my decency and whatever morality I might have. I got pretty much from him. Every time I say it, he always says he's amazed to hear it. But the fact is, Phil is an amazing guy and a very devout Christian guy. Didn't push it on anybody or anything. He just wouldn't let me get away with doing dumb stuff like throwing wrappers out of the car window. He would, however, let me get away with other dumb stuff, and so would Doug. The three of us hang out pretty much every day, and then at the end of the afternoon shows, we'd have shows at 1, 2:30, 4, and 8:30. And after the 4:30 show, we'd often go out for dinner. We'd go to New Hickory Barbecue in Miami. And I was sitting there at New Hickory Barbecue pretty much about this age. And they had this amazing, that kind of really kind of creamy coleslaw, the stuff that's just got so much mayonnaise in it, and it's just really lovely. So I was at New Hickory eating this coleslaw. And I said, I could eat a gallon of this. I could eat a gallon of this. This is fantastic. And he said, okay, what do you want to bet? I don't remember what the bet was, but I do remember that I bet that I could eat a gallon of coleslaw. So up at the observatory we go. We take like a gallon's worth of this coleslaw out of New Hickory. We're sitting up there. On top of the Museum of Science was an observatory, and there were square buildings, flat top buildings, and you'd open the door, unpin the things, and then the roof would slide back on rails, and it was kind of a haul. It felt a lot like opening a hangar door, but so these 2 or 3, I want to say 3 telescope bays would go back. So we're sitting in there. It was a Friday night, and I'm doing my usual, social butterfly scene, sitting up in an observatory with a couple of other dorks trying to see if I can eat a gallon of coleslaw. So they put a sign around my neck, and these are the guys I grew up with, Phil and Doug. They put a sign around my neck and started taking pictures, and it would be like, 1/10 of a gallon or whatever, and I'm just wolfing it down. And by the time I got to the second bowl, I knew I wasn't even going to come close, but I had to put on a good show, So I just kept stuffing myself full of this coleslaw, and I want to say I got maybe third of a gallon, something like that, and then I lost it. I also remember, strangely enough, there was one night up there with a guy who was not a regular by any means, but he was it might have been like an administrator in the museum or something. I forget how he came up there, but he came up there often enough to talk about things. And we were talking about, I was 14 or 15, and we were talking about tanks, and I had just built every tank in the world, model tank in the world. And it's been so long now that I'm not 100% sure I'm right about this, but I was 100% sure at the time. So he said that, I said something about the Panther, the German Panther tank being the Panzerkampfwagen 5. And he said, no, it's not the 5, it's the 4. I said, it's not, it's the 5. And we got into a big discussion about this. So here's this 13-year-old kid and this full-grown man, probably in his late 20s, early 30s. And I knew I was right. And so we made a bet. And the bet turned out to be a week's pay. So I'm wagering a lot less than this guy is. But we, in front of everybody, we bet, shook hands on it, brought in the evidence. I was right. And the guy welched on it. And I haven't experienced that much because I don't do any gambling, but I got to tell you, it's a rotten feeling because, you know, when somebody welches on you, I would have paid him if I was wrong. There's no way I could have faced my friends if I was wrong and hadn't paid the guy. He just decided to not pay me. So anyway, those were the days when we were in the planetarium. There's a planetarium building. I'll go back to this, even though there's not really much of a picture here to show you. So if you look at the picture on the right, you can see the star projector in the middle of the room there, bottom right-hand corner. And all around the building on the outside edge is a hallway we call the ambulatory. And we could open the front doors leading into the museum, and they would come all the way around the ambulatory and wait because there's another set of back doors behind me. And we would hold them there, and then we'd seat them, you know, when the show began. So we had, in front of all of these shows, what we called walk-in music, because if the show would start at 1, 2:30, 4, and 8:30, somewhere around 2:15 for the 2:30 show, we'd open the doors. People would come down this curved hallway. We had these amazing 6-7 foot tall glow-in-the-dark scenes from astronomy. They were beautiful, beautiful, enormous, great things. They were just gorgeous. There was this Arecibo telescope, and there was Galileo and Copernicus and all of these guys. And I remember just loving that. I went back to the planetarium many years later, and somebody written on them with pens. And then several years after that, they'd put plexiglass over them. And then several years after that, they'd covered them up with particle board and put some cheesy NASA posters up there. And then several years after that, I went back to the planetarium. If it wasn't the last time I was there, it was second to last time I was there. And as I pull up my car, I look around the back. There's like a little back area there behind the parking lot where most people couldn't see. And I saw this stack of things that I went over, and there they were, sitting out in the rain and the sun for months, completely warped and chipped. It was just criminal. Anyway, to give you an idea what life with Phil and Doug was like, and the rest of the gang, the guy facing away from us is Herb. Herb, that'll maybe come to me. Anyway, we were getting ready to go on an airplane ride. It was the 500th anniversary of Columbus's discovering America, and Eastern Airlines had a special flight out to, I forget the name of the island. But anyway, it was a chance to ride an airplane, got to sit up in the front. That was cool. So anyway, here's the point of all of this. We would sit there and play music for 15 or 20 minutes prior to the show. And the person who was the director, became the director of the planetarium, at first he was the creative director, was a guy named Jack Horkheimer. And Jack Horkheimer became a huge part of my life. And I don't think there's been anybody in my life who was so who I felt so hot and cold about. He was a genius. He was a jazz pianist. He had terrible lung conditions. He moved to Miami. They told him he wouldn't live 6 months if he stayed up in wherever the hell he was from. And he moved to Miami. But he was a jazz pianist, went under the name of Jack Foley. But he got down there. He finds himself at the Planetarium. I don't know too much about all of this. It's just reconstruction kind of thing. Finds himself in the Miami Planetarium. And what he is an actual, honest-to-God genius writer and director. And he had the most amazing musical background because he was an incredible, jazz musician. So Jack would write these shows, and all of the Planetarium shows prior to Jack Horkheimer, who went on to become Star Hustler, which then became Stargazer. If you ever saw PBS TV, well, keep looking up. There's a little 4-minute astronomy thing they had on every night on PBS. So prior to Jack, they would just, a star show would be, and over here we can see the constellation Orion with the 3 stars that make up the belt. And over here is the giant red star Betelgeuse. The opposite corner, you can see down here on the bottom right, is the star Rigel, which is, you can tell, distinctly blue in color. And this would be like pre-recorded shows like this. It's like, are you kidding me? This Planetarium machine we had is a Spitz. The big places had this thing called a Zeiss. The Zeiss is 4 times the size of our star projector in the corner there. And it was made out of cast lead, I think. And the Zeiss was just this monster, and it moved very, very slowly. And it didn't even project stars. It projected disks. The bigger the disk, the bigger the brighter star was supposed to be. It's a completely artificial looking star field. And then along comes this little company called Spitz. And Spitz makes this machine that you see there on the bottom right, and that was called the Space Transit Planetarium. And it was a analog computer-driven, very lightweight star projector that used pinholes and lenses on either of those 2 hemispheres with a brilliant arc light inside and put out a very realistic-looking sky, but more importantly, it was very light and very fast, and it had the ability to do just kind of basic computer functions. So, for example, the reason I got started actually in the Planetarium was because they had a show that Jack had wrote called Buck Rogers Right On, and it was the basic element of Buck Rogers. This is why he was such a genius. Dave Big Booty says he's in Florida tonight. Is this planetarium still around? Dave, the Museum of Science, I don't know if it's been torn down. I think it has been. There's a new planetarium in Miami, and I was so enormously relieved to find out that in the lobby outside of the new planetarium is the old planetarium star projector, and that machine is a friend of mine. That machine and I go back a long, long way. So you're going to get some planetarium tells whether you like it or not. If you look at the star machine on the right there, it used to have there needed to be a way to cut off the stars. So in other words, you've got bright arc lights in either one of those 2 hemispheres, and they're shining through these pinholes and these little lenses to put the stars up on the dome. But you also had to have a horizon line, otherwise the stars would be on the walls and go across the floor. So you had to have some kind of horizon line. So what Spitz did was they bolted these arc lights onto each of those end of those spindly things. And to make a horizon, what they did was they surrounded these really bright arc lights with like a dome. It was a clear glass structure, and then inside it was another clear glass structure, and in the distance between, a tiny little distance there, was filled with this thick red oil. And as the machine would turn, no matter which way it would turn, the oil would always seek its level, and the light couldn't go through the oil, could only go out through the parts on the top, and it was a pretty decent, kind of clever system, except for the fact that when these lamps would go, they'd often explode. And I remember several of those. So when the star lamp would explode, it would shatter that glass thing, and all of this oil would run into the star hemispheres on the end and start clogging up the stars and start draining out through the electronics. And not that there were any electronics in there. I think the thing was coal powered, to be honest with you. So over the course of many, many years, I got there in 73 and the place opened in 66. So if you look at the bottom right again, you'll see that the star projector is surrounded by those little wooden panels there. And that's called the pit. And down below the floor, below the pit, there's a series of like light wheels, just lights with a turning color wheel, and it throw these different colored lights on the star projector, and the shadow would go up onto the dome, and it was great. But after 10 years or so, well, not 10, but damn near 7 or 8, after 7 or 8 years of exploding star lenses, the entire floor of that pit, which you can't see, which is actually down about another 2 or 3 feet lower, was filled with this black tar. It was just filled with it. It was filthy. And this place was running so many, they were running so many shows. They were just so desperate to keep the income up. There were a lot of people coming in those days that they just never had time to shut the place down long enough to do all this. And there was just nasty, nasty old electronics in there, and the light, some of the light wheels weren't working, and they make a lot of noise. And I remember Phil, who was the chief engineer there, the head technician at the Planetarium. He was 10 years older than me, so he must have been 24. He was just a kid. But I remember him saying, I never get a chance to repair anything. I'm never allowed to do anything. He's an electrical engineer. Because we can never shut down long enough to get some work done. Finally, something happens, and they shut the Planetarium down for 2 or 3 days. And I've got the pictures somewhere. I just don't have them on me. The first thing we do is we pull out those wooden side rails there next to the pit. And we go, when I say we, I mean 13, 14-year-old Billy goes into this pit, and we start just cleaning up all of this oil. And there's a picture of me where it looks like I've just been like on the beach after the, Exxon Valdez or something. I mean, my hands are just black with this stuff, and my legs or pants legs are rolled up, and my bare feet are black with it. I'm just covered, and probably smeared over my face, just covered with all this nasty black oil. Anyway, we were able to get that black oil out and paint it. And then, just because it's such a good memory for me, we got all the oil out, painted the floor of that thing gray. We'd bought a couple of new color wheels, and the old color wheels, which made so much noise, just made a crazy amount of noise. We just hated those things, and we finally had a chance to pull them out. And I remember saying, what are we going to do with these things? And Phil and Doug looked at each other, and they looked at me. And this is how I remembered it. I remember exact words, but Phil looked at me and he said, I think we're going to have to sacrifice it. I said, what? So he grabs these 2 or 3 color wheels, these ancient pieces of electronic, with wire, the plug-in cables and everything. And it's like, you're not explaining what we're doing. We're following him around. He goes, it's just 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And we go out into the parking lot. He's got these things with him, and he puts them on a pile there in the asphalt. And I don't know what he used, but it was something, some kind of a accelerant. And we just set them on fire. And we burned them in the parking lot at 2:30 in the morning. And this nasty black smoke just went straight up. And we were doing this, this ritual to get rid of these bloody, awful, freaking nasty ass color wheels. Now we have new color wheels and everything's great. So, back to business. Jack Horkheimer was a genuine genius, and he got a hold of the Planetarium, and it was an outlet for him. I don't think he knew much about astronomy particularly, but he was a creative guy, and he's stuck in Miami. So he started writing these shows. He wrote a show called Buck Rogers Right On, and now we get to the point. At the beginning of Buck Rogers, you had a 15-minute, 20-minute period where people were walking into the Planetarium. You had to play some music for them. So the walk-in music for Buck Rogers Right On was a series of old radio shows from the 30s and early 40s. So there I am, 14 years old, and I'm listening to Fred Allen, and I'm listening to Allen's Alley, and I get Senator Claghorn, and I get Mrs. Nussbaum, and I get all of this golden age of radio stuff that I never, ever, ever would have, needless to say, even ever encountered ever. Buck Rogers Right On was made right after Mariner 9, so it was the whole purpose of it was that Buck Rogers gets transported into the future or something like that, and to the present, and we see that Mars is very, very different from the way they thought that Mars was going to be when the Buck Rogers stuff was on. So it was a very clever idea. That show was eventually canceled, by the way. It's the only show we ever had where people called in and complained. I don't remember what it was, but I do remember the name of the group that called to complain. I'm not making this up. And shut down the show was the Periwinkle Garden Club. Decided that there was something offensive in that show, so they finally shut it down. But anyway, Jack's just warming up. So 1972, he writes his masterpiece. It's my second favorite show of his. And it's called Child of the Universe. And Child of the Universe starts out, the walk-in music for Child of the Universe was Kurt Weill and Lotte Lenya. They were, I was 13, 14 years old. And when I say listening to, I mean, I heard these things hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. Kurt Weill and Lotte Lenya, and this cabaret music from the period between World War I and World War II in Germany. And it's brutal stuff, man. I mean, it's really brutal stuff. It was sung in German, and then occasionally we'd do it, like an English version would follow. But I remember one of these songs was called Hamburgers. We Like Our Hamburgers Raw. It's like, Johnny is missing, Jimmy is dead, and George went crazy shooting. But blood is blood and red is red, and the army is still recruiting. Like our hamburgers raw. So it's basically, a soldier song about them getting just annihilated. So I'm listening to Kurt Weill and classical music there. Then the whole purpose of this, by the way, was to say that one of the big breakout songs that Kurt Weill and Lotte Lenya had was called "Lost in the Stars," and sung in English as well. And it's basically saying, and we're lost out here in the stars, little stars, big stars, blowing through the night. And it's basically about how lost and lonely and insignificant we are. And Jack started the show in let's just pick a date, 1935, Germany. He started a show in Germany in 1935, talked about just in passing, talked about the pre-war period, and said, that this idea that we were just a speck in the universe, no God, no nothing, no nothing, just us and the little dust mote out there. He said that kind of led to, what happened. And then he starts to say, but, we're not just a little speck, because he talks about, starts taking this journey, and it's like, this is what a hair looks like. This is the inside of your ear. This is, this is what a cell looks like. Here are your taste buds. And made the point that we were this, hey, how are you? We're good, thanks. Have a good night. Made the point that this was kind of, that we were a universe in ourselves. And then he ended it with something that's kind of corny now, but it's really quite moving at the time. It was a poem called Desiderata. And it's, it was a real 60s kind of thing. You go placidly amid the noise and haste and remember what something in peace thereof. But it was set to music, and the refrain was, "You are a child of the universe. Just like the trees and the stars, you have a right to be here." He did that. And I'm not going to go on with this all night, but the show he did after that was the show that was playing when I came in, when I started working there. It just blew my mind. It was called Long Journey of a Young God. The Apollo program had just ended. I have read You Are a Fluke of the Universe, by the way, Dave Big Booty. I mean, I have heard it. It's hilarious. It's a caricature of that. So when I got there, the show was called Long Journey of a Young God. I got a chance to go to the planetarium and volunteer because I won some prize during the Buck Rogers show. That you could have this gigantic box that I think Phil built. It's a huge thing, and it weighed about 4 pounds and had buttons on it, and you could yaw left, yaw right, roll left, roll clockwise, roll counterclockwise, pitch up, pitch down, and you could fly the entire planetarium around. And you had to kind of do this kind of docking thing, and I did it. and I did it real fast. In fact, I did it so fast that that they had like 4 minutes of music, and I got this thing lined up in, I don't know, 30 seconds, 40 seconds. So then they started taking control back to themselves and knocking me off. I didn't know what that was going on. I was just, these buttons aren't working, and starts to get out of control, and I just try and recover this ship. It's just craziness. But Long Journey of a Young God, just as an example, in that show we had Bach's Fifth Brandenburg Concerto. We had The Swan of Tuonela. We had just a number of things, and all of them had this kind of just amazing music. I had a birthday, and I got for my birthday, I got a set of Pro 4AA headsets, I think. Or maybe that was the name of the amplifier. In any event, we went to Radio Shack, got an amplifier kit, and went to the back bench there in the back, and Phil helped me build this amplifier. I'm back there doing my first soldering, which wasn't so good actually, and Phil showing me how the little the little bands on the transistors, what they meant, and their capacitance and all that other stuff. And I'm just taking a single transistor, just like the size of a grain of rice, and you're bending the little things, just sticking it into what we would eventually call the motherboard, circuit board, I guess, and just soldering it on there. But sure enough, we turned it on and it worked. That was actually a big feeling. But the first album I ever got, I think, was given to me by Phil, and it was the Brandenburg Concertos from Johann Sebastian Bach. There was a constant, ongoing war about who the greatest organist was, whether it was E. Power Biggs or I don't remember. Anyway, it's awfully strange, but it was really great. And the thing I remember really the most was that, just go back one more time and we'll get on with the questions. So there I am on the left. I just come to Florida from Bermuda. I was real popular in Bermuda. Here in Florida, I'm just this geek, and I don't know how to hold my books, and I have a funny accent, and nobody knows me, and I'm thin and getting thinner as I get taller, and the schools were so freaking awful compared to the British schools that I'd gone to, that I would, I'd wake up, and I realized I had a choice of either going to school and listening to this stuff that was 3 years behind me, or I could just skip school and go to the planetarium and learn some astronomy and learn about all this music and stuff. So that kid on the left did a lot of that, and that put Doug and especially Phil in a tough place, because they knew it was important for me to get to school, but I think they also knew that I hated school, that school was, especially junior high, was just terrifying experience. And so on one hand, they know, I remember many times coming, I missed the bus. I missed the bus. I had to take the city bus. I thought, since it's going past here, I just kind of yeah, sure, go to school. But even though they constantly told me to, they also understood, I think, that, they didn't blame me one bit. I mean, there's no point in me being in a class. I had a class at Ponce de Leon Junior High School. They had reading class. And I went in there for the first day, and I forget what the reading assignment was, but I do remember I did the reading assignment for, in about, I want to say 30 minutes out of the 50-minute class period. And I kind of just said, now what? And she gave me an independent study card, because that was the reading assignment for the week. So I got a little card with a little face, and then an infinity symbol outside, and then inside the brain was another infinity symbol, and it just gave me the opportunity to go down to the library and read about ion propulsion and specific impulse and how all that stuff works. But anyway, it was a very eclectic childhood, and for which I am very, very grateful. Jack Died many years ago. At least 10, I would think now, something like that. I remember I did an afterburner about him. And here's the thing about this guy. He was absolutely unbearable to be with. He was just an absolute raving lunatic, hyperventilating, screaming and yelling. He would write these shows. He would then say, because the thing Jack loved was the press previews, because that was like some fame, and he invited the entire Miami press corps, and they all came. So we'd have these giant previews for these planetarium shows, which are done manually, and pretty much every time I remember, I was running them from 15 or 16 on, because I was the best guy they had there, and we would be putting slides into the trays while people were filing into the press preview. And, I had a paper one more time. In the picture of me leaning against the console there, you can see the pointer, and then there's a black panel. It's actually dark red, and we would light that thing up, and it would rear light the script. So we'd have the script, and we just, writing 6, 2, 2, and 4. These were the projector numbers. And I just go down and start moving these dials and fading things in and out. And when I said I was good at it, I was real smooth with the fades and real good with the zoom, could fly the planetarium around and all the rest of it. But Jack would be behind me. We're running the show. I've never seen it before. No one's ever seen it before, ever. We spent the last 2 days working around the clock, 24 hours a day to get the slides ready, because Horkheimer couldn't deliver a script until, 2 days or the day before the actual press preview. I can certainly relate to that. And we'd be in there, and we'd be cutting tape and putting music down, literally laying music down, recording over the dialogue on a different track with, you had a turntable. And some of the records that Horkheimer had were so old and had so many scratches on them. This is going to be a memory for a few people who are old enough. There were so many scratches on these things that we had this, the kind of thing you use to clean the top of an LP, 33 LP, and it was like a little felt little brush, and then a cleaning fluid. You'd wipe this thing around and get the dust off. Well, we had to float the needle in cleaning fluid. The thing was just completely liquid, and we floated the needle, got a lot of the pops and clicks out. So anyway, I remember being in the back of this console. Yeah, I said last time, you know me, I'm never as good as my word. So I'm there running these shows. I am trying to read. As I'm reading the script, looking for the cues, I'm automatically doing on the left, the console I'm leaning against. I'm automatically bringing up the 6 projectors, cross-dissolving 5 and 6 in the middle, bringing up 1 and 2 on the sides, 3 and 4, 1 and 4 on the sides, 2 and 3 on the lower sides. And I'm flying the Star Machine around, and I'm doing all this for the first time ever in front of a packed room with 320 people from the Miami Herald and all the TV stations and all the rest of it. And Horkheimer would be behind me, and he'd be going, "Where's the slide? Where's the slide?" It's like, "It's not here yet, Jack. Jesus Christ, the cue's not for another." Okay. He was just insane. And many times had reduced me to tears, just reduced me to tears. But if you look at my business card there and you crank your head sideways, it says Space Transit Planetarium of the Museum of Science, Bill Whittle. Below that it says Console Wizard. That was my business card, my first business card there. We had a, oh my God. No, I'll never forgive myself if I tell this story. All right. So, and this is the end of the planetarium tale. So one year we had the SEPA conference at Miami, Southeastern Planetarium Association. And that meant that for 2 or 3 days, all of these other planetarium operators and directors were in Miami. And I had to run 5 or 6 different shows, some of which I'd never seen, and many of which I hadn't seen for several years. So every time we put on a new show, we had to put new tapes on. We had to go up and change literally open up the boxes and pull out the slide projector trays, drop a new tray in there. Never use the locking rings though, because the locking rings could have, you never use the locking rings in the Zoom, because the Zoom, if the locking ring came out, would destroy the machine. Anyway, so we're doing all of this stuff, and I've always had this bizarre kind of theatrical bent, and I can't explain it. And so for the highlight of that conference, we were doing the last show in the conference, and it was going to be Child of the Universe. And so everybody's in the room, and instead of coming around the back, the front door's open, and I had them play Elton John's Pinball Wizard. And I came into the room with blue makeup and blue glitter on my face, and I was dressed in like a black satin robe and a pointy hat, and I was sitting on a chair that was on a dolly, and my friend Steve Stipp pushed me into the room and started wheeling me to the front. I'm sitting there on some kind of throne or something while Pinball Wizard is playing, and I kind of want to remember that there was actually a lot of applause, because I was the mascot. You know, I was if you look at the kid on the left hand side, I was just the you know, I was the puppy. They called me Termite because I had big teeth, big buck teeth at the time. So anyway, I remember being carted in there, got to the back of the planetarium in the console there, where the console was, got in there, fired up the show, ran maybe the best version of Child of the Universe I've ever run, and it was a faultless show. Usually you'd make some kind of mistake. I mean, 200 cues that had to be done manually, or you come in later, you forget to advance the slide or something. I did it absolutely perfectly, and I remember the lights came up, and there was this big cheer, and I was very proud of myself. Meanwhile, my dating life was accelerating away from me so quickly that it was actually, you know, girls were starting to kind of look slightly red from the Doppler effect of them moving away so fast. But anyway, that was it. Doug Gagan, who I mentioned died recently, was the only guy who I saw who was as good as me and probably better than me. We challenged Doug to do Long Journey of a Young God. There's a sequence in there called the Apollo sequence. It's a history of the Apollo program, and it is just fast. Billy the Kid is the music from Aaron Copland. And we're just moving and moving. Everything's got to be quick. 1 and 4 up. Okay, 2 and 3 down, advance. 5 and 6 crossfade, advance. 5, 6 and 5 crossfade, advance. 6, 1 and 4 down, advance them both. And you're just moving this thing. And it's very hard. It's a 10-minute sequence, narrated by Sally Jesse Raphael. And Doug was very good at it. And just before Doug left the planetarium, I don't know if it was me or Phil, but I remember it was the two of us and Bill DeShong, maybe a couple of other people. Somebody said, "All right, Gagan, you're good, but he said, I could do the thing blindfolded." You never want to make statements like that with this crowd. I noticed this crowd of 3 or 4 people. Any kind of a declarative statement like that usually meant there was going to be a test, and that's really kind of fun. So one time I wanted to go to New Hickory very much. They didn't want to go to New Hickory, and they said, "We'll go to New Hickory if you will do somersaults on the floor all the way around the planetarium ambulatory." So I did. So anyway, we get Doug Gagan back after dinner, and we're back in the planetarium, and we tie his nasty ass polyester tie around his eyes, put something in there, tied his tie around his head like this, real tight, and then we said, "All right, we got all the slides queued up." We skipped into the Apollo sequence, hit play on the giant Sony reel-to-reels. And the Apollo sequence started, and Doug just turned and just did the thing like a machine. And he was flying things in and flying everything around. We were utterly amazed. And there was a point in that sequence, or right after, where we had a picture of the moon would come up on the lower right. And the console operator had to take the pointer and point out the crater Tycho. We had just a little arrow. We'd point out Tycho. And with his eyes closed, his blindfolded, and facing 90 degrees away from this, Doug Egan picked up that pointer and did this and touched the button, and he was precisely on Tycho. Exactly. That's, it's like you could be off by, just a couple of arc seconds and you'd be off. When he did that, we just said, all right, we lose. We all hail Dougie. So anyway, that's what got me all of this background and weird things. And once you start getting enough weird things in your head, then you kind of set up an internal sort of matrix where everything else kind of fits. And that's the story of my iPhone music, which consists of some very, very good music and some very, very bad music. But it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I know Phil watches this show sometimes. And Phil, if you're watching, I got to tell you, I know I've told you before, I don't mean to embarrass you. It's hard to do it without embarrassing myself. But honest to God, man, you were the dad I didn't have. And I sure as hell had a lot of fun. I really did. And I learned a lot from you, and not just astronomy stuff. Okay, moving on. Here we go. So, the long march through the questions on Facebook shall now commence. Let's go back. Here we go. Let's see what we got. Go back again. Go back again. Stratosphere Lounge. Go back one more time. Isn't it fun listening to the things that a producer would do when your host gets to say out loud all the things that normally a producer would do? I think it's just charming. All right, I'm almost running out of desktop space here, so now we're going to scroll down and we're going to find out what we got question-wise. And well, I'm always in a big hurry to go home and see my beautiful wife, who presumably is watching this now. How are you, baby? I hope you're doing well. Hope your leg's better. I'm not in any particular, I don't have a hard out this time, so I'll just do a bunch of questions. Okay, so here we go. There's the... come on. Stratosphere Lounge. Look at all the stuff we post here. It's absolutely amazing. There's 3 of us, and we put out 2 shows a day. Where's the Stratosphere Lounge in question? There it is. Got it. Okay, here we go. Dun, 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 dun. It's another thing I learned from the Planetarium. Steve Darrow would like to know, do you watch any of the long-form interview shows such as Joe Rogan, Shapiro's Sunday Special, The Rubin Report, Candace Owens, ? I think you would be good in those settings. I know you did Rubin's show. Since most of those are based in your neighborhood, can you use your contacts to gain an invite? Yes, I suppose I can. It's easier for me to invite. It's easy for me to invite people to interview, and we did a bunch of them with After Hours. It's kind of awkward for me to invite myself to an interview. The honest truth of it is, I spent a year, like a full year, pursuing this Star Citizen thing because I was obsessed by it. I still think it's the future. I think it is the stepping stone into feature filmmaking. Every day that goes by, I become more and more convinced. My wife and I were driving down the streets, Sherman Oaks the other day, and we saw a movie set, and there's just trailer after trailer after trailer, and this giant arc lights, and they're, got a crew of 30 to feed or 300 to feed or so on. And then you got to pay all the actors and the insurance, all of this stuff. If you've ever been on a movie set, it's an army, and it's boring because it takes forever. And actors will sit there and they'll do one scene, and then they'll go outside and they'll sit there for 3.5, 4 hours while they light the next setup. But I was looking at all of these trucks and remembering how big a deal it is and why movies cost as much as they do. And I just remember thinking, nah, no one's going to do this. In 2 or 3 years, no one's going to do it. I am already seeing, and this is real time, mind you. This is like 60 frames a second, which is inconceivable to me. But I'm seeing 60 frames a second motion capture of a human face that I cannot distinguish, and I'm an expert at this. I cannot distinguish this from a person. Now, these are still just tests, but it's in real time, 60 frames a second. And when I talk to people about the Aurora project, I tell them that in another year or two, I'll be able to make Lawrence of Arabia in the studio, and you won't be able to tell the difference. I not only see, this is the thing. I know I'll get back to the actual question, but all of the stuff that we want to do for the Aurora project and stuff it's important, and it's in fact, I think it's critically important. But with the facilities needed to do those videos, we are now really right on the cusp of the end of feature filmmaking as we knew it. Why would you take 50 people in a convoy of trucks 600 miles to shoot a scene on a location, and then have to feed them, keep them there overnight, pay them overtime, the lighting guys, the sound guys. It's moving an army in order to get what you're looking for. But I'm beginning to realize, I'm not saying I entirely like this, mind you, don't get me wrong, but with facial motion capture being as good as it is now, and body mocap, why would you do that? Why would you just not make it here? If you have an actor that's got little dots on his face, and those aren't even needed anymore. Guy's wearing a suit, and he's got a camera in front of him, and you can do as many of these actors as you want, but let's just say it's 2 people having a conversation together. I wanted to do, and I still want to do, I not only want to, I am going to do this Big Bat Problems movie, which I always saw as a live-action film, and I still see it as a live-action film. However, I will not make this, if this film is not able to be made so that you can't tell it's not an actual movie, then I won't make it. But then I'll go out and shoot it for real. But for more and more production, I'm beginning to really see the light on this. I think, at least for a person my age, I think I am well ahead of the curve on this. I don't think people realize, as a general rule, how the billions and billions and billions of dollars generated by the computer game industry has driven this technology to the point where, why would I take 60 people 500 miles? Why not just take 2 people in here? The acting is all that really matters, and that's being translated, voice, face, motion, all that stuff's being translated onto a character that you cannot tell is real. You can put him in an environment that you won't be able to tell is real. You'll be able to light it in a way that you could never light anything for real. And that's how movies are going to be made. Undoubtedly, there will continue to be live action shots out there and all the rest of it. But when you think about the effort necessary for getting a film made, it's monstrous. And I don't see any reason why. The reason I am convinced this is going to happen, I told Natasha this, is not because I think it's cool or because Hollywood thinks it's cool. I think it's going to happen because it's going to be orders of magnitude less expensive. And that's why it's going to get done. Because it's going to be orders of magnitude less expensive. It's like this business now, the film business has been changing so much, and we watched it change. I know this doesn't have much to do with Dave Rubin, but I'll get back to him. And one of the things that we watched was watching production leave California because it's so expensive to shoot in California. I shot a scene down on Venice Beach, and I needed permits, and I think it cost $12,000. That was back in the day. And it's just nuts. So now you hear about all this production that's going to Georgia, or it's going to, Vancouver, because they're offering tax breaks, New Mexico. And then I realized, who cares about that anymore? We're not there. There's no location. It doesn't matter. We don't need permits to go out in the streets of Los Angeles, because we're not going out in the streets anywhere. We don't need permits to go anywhere. We're gonna eventually just be able to do whatever we want to in here. And I find that actually very exciting, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so fired up about all of this stuff. And I'm going to tie this up in a bow with the interview question, because I started out seeing the potential for video game characters, and then as this technology advanced, and as I stayed watching a lot of these videos constantly about what the game engines are doing and stuff. And then I started seeing videos where I said, I cannot tell I just don't know that that's not a person. And that's when it occurred to me that this is not just where video game type entertainment is going. It's where the movies are going, and it's where the big movies are going. Why would you spend $50 million to take people all around the world and stuff when you can spend $5 million and just pay the actors and a couple of flunkies on a motion capture stage? Andy Serkis is going to go down in history as essentially kind of the combination of Charlie Chaplin and oh my God, what's his name? You got to give me a second here. I really do want to know this. Oh, come on. D.W. Griffith. He's a pioneer, and he is really good at this. And his performance, first of all, is as a Gollum, and then he played King Kong, and then he played Planet Caesar in the Planet of the Apes movies. He has been so good at this. It's pretty much all him, to be honest with you. That Andy Serkis has made this thing possible. He's made people believe it. We just saw, my wife and I just watched Lord of the Rings. She'd never seen it before. It was my 5th or 6th times through the extended edition, 3 movies, 4 hours each. And having not seen it for a couple of years, and having been as involved in CG as I have been lately, I was beginning to see a lot about Gollum that didn't look real to me. It looked very real to me when I saw it in 2001, 2, and 3. So even then, it's advancing. But Andy Serkis, by the way, who was hired as an extra or something, he really was. He was hired as an extra in Nothing Burger. As a guy he needed somebody to climb in a suit and climb up a ladder for the first one, and what he did with the face and the performance and the voice, he was so impressive that Peter Jackson remodeled Gollum between the first movie and the second two. If you look at Gollum in the first movie, you only get one glimpse of him. He's climbing up, following him after they're in the mines of Moria. You get one look at his face, completely different from the character that ended up in 2 and 3, because the Gollum in 2 and 3 was based on Andy Serkis. He's an amazing, amazing, amazing guy. I really have an enormous, enormous respect for him. Anyway, I said all of this, Steve, because this whole thing is so exciting to me, and so I'm so convinced that this is the future of political messaging, of any kind of messaging. It's the future of entertainment. It's the future of getting into people's subconscious minds through the willing suspension of disbelief. And I spent a year tracking this thing down and feeling the pressure, believe it or not, constant pressure of the fact that I wasn't doing enough of the political work. I mean, we went 10 months, I think, without a firewall. A lot of that was the fact that the last firewall I did on Jamie Foxx had 65,000 views. I thought it was incredibly low. And then I do the one last week, Eyewitness to a Massacre. I think it's at 17,000 17,000. How I can have 125,000 subscribers and have it be seen by 17,000 people is interesting, don't you think? So, but these are the rules. This is the game, whether I like it or not. So to answer your question, Steve, I took a long time going down that path, and we got a lot done, and we have a lot to do, and I'm very, very excited about the future of it. But I did certainly neglect the political stuff because I was just out of time. And with Scott getting the new website up, we went, we were doing right angles. We were doing, 5 shows a week, a show a day on right angle. That was better part of 8 or 9 months. No, it wasn't that long. 6 months. 4 or 5 months ago, Scott and I had the idea to do Bill Whittle Now. That's been every day, so that's 10 shows a week. And then I just realized a couple weeks ago, a month ago maybe, it's like I need to do these firewalls. And I was convinced I was written out. What I really needed was a break. I needed some time away from these things to get my head onto other stuff. And so now I'm back. I've done 3 firewalls in 3 weeks, and I will do a firewall a week unless something comes up. But the plan is a firewall a week. And I'm doing all this stuff because I want the members back. I want my members back. I don't blame anybody for falling off, especially since some of the time it's been like we hired teams of cryptographers to make it absolutely certain that nobody could give me any money, make it so difficult that it was impossible to pay me, even if you really, 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 really wanted to. So we're trying to put all those problems behind us. But it's like coming out of a loop. Steve, so the roundabout, our roundabout answer to your question is I haven't been on those shows for a while because I've been off the radar for a while, and I know it, and I feel it, and it's going to take a little while to get back on the radar, but that's the price I pay for doing what I did, and I don't regret it for one instance. And I think when the fat ladies finished singing, by the way, I used to hear Kate Smith singing "God Bless America" in the Buck Rogers show. It's not an experience I particularly cared for, to be honest with you. As I get back, getting these priorities correct, and none of this would be possible without Scott Ott. None of it. Scott does all the work on Bill Whittle Now. He prepares the questions, he does the editing, posts it, does the descriptions. It's all him. I just sit there and, gas about things. But I have to tell you, Bill Whittle Now, I would like to see that show go wider. And I had lunch with Jeremy Boring a couple months ago, I guess now. And he said, look, it's Bill Whittle Now is a great show. I'd buy it from you. It is a way to hold on to members. But you're not going to get new people with that. I thought, yeah, he's probably right. But with that said, after 10 years of doing these firewalls and afterburners, I think I think Bill Whittle Now is a tremendous show, and the reason I think it's a tremendous show is because Scott is so good at the follow-up questions and so on. That show is about testing conservatism. That show is about conservatism versus the world. That's what that show's about. And I never know what he's going to ask me, ever. Stuff comes right out of the blue. The Chinese are cloning people. What do you think about that? Well, what do my principles tell me? What do my principles say about that? And so we start, half the time at least I haven't given it any thought, and I start thinking about, all right, well, where's the freedom angle? That's the number one thing. Where's the freedom angle? Okay, that's good. Now, is there moral harm being done here? Well, if there is, then we have to look at that. And I just think it's, we did 133, we recorded 133 shows, and tomorrow we're going to do 134 and 135. And it's, there's hardly a week goes by when we don't. Scott says that thanks for the members of making this possible, and we just a beat of silence, and then the show's over. We're still recording often, and I'm talking to Scott on the Skype, and I said, "Man, I have no idea where that came from. It was just really cool. It was a cool answer. I have no idea where it came from." So anyway, the two things that are going on, Steve, is we're putting out a major effort to recover as many of the members that we lost, and instead of me telling everybody about what I'm going to do, which is my 10-year-old practice, largely because of Scott's influence and Natasha's influence, both of whom made me a much better person, Natasha especially. I'm just doing it. And I like the one I did yesterday a lot. I liked them all. And this is the thing. They're so hard for me to write. And it's like every time I sat down and wrote them, I liked them all. I never wrote one I didn't like. So I expect that when we get those firewalls out there all the time, we start picking up the numbers and start getting back on the radar again, then I will get calls to do these shows. I'm having lunch with Jeremy next week, as a matter of fact. But in any event, it's a very good question, and it certainly stings a bit. You know, there was a chance to get to CPAC. Somebody was talking about getting me to CPAC, and they talked to the directors of CPAC, and none of them knew who I was. That doesn't bother me particularly because I'm not in this to have people recognize me. But it was a bit of a shock, to be honest with you, after 10 years of doing this, and it was an indication of how far off the radar I'd gotten. So now we're putting the horse in front of the cart where it belongs, and the fever broke. I still spend a lot of time on it, on the video game stuff. I keep saying video game stuff. It's got nothing to do with video games. On animated productions, animated computer-generated political messaging. But nevertheless, we're back in order here, and we got 3 firewalls in 3 weeks, and next week we'll have 4 firewalls in 4 weeks. So I'm not going to really ask for people to come back until I have a reasonable track record of delivering what I say I'm going to deliver. Because build time has always been much slower than real time, and can't do that anymore. So I'm hoping to be on all of those shows. I know Ben very well, and I've never met Joe Rogan. I did the segments with Candace Owens, and I did Ruben's show, and I think when I saw him last, he said, "Yeah, you need to come back to do another one." So we'll see. But anyway, that's the plan. And like I said, it's a little easier to invite people to do interviews, have me interview people, than it is for me to call up people and say, "Hey, can I be on your show?" Although, frankly, if I was half good at this, that's exactly what I would be doing. If only somebody could let them know. Foghorn got this whole thing right, by the way. The new BillWhittle.com motto is join for the guilt and stay for the people. That's really a big breakthrough idea that Scott had. Was that what we really have here is an astonishing group of people, and the whole thing with Merlin and his wife and all that stuff really just woke me up to the fact that no, there is nobody like this. I've never met a group of people like this. Yeah, and the members on the new site, the stuff the members are posting is phenomenal. I mean, I'm looking at virtually all of these posts. I usually don't have time to comment on all of them, but in any event, I'm just watching members posting stories, which is cool, but writing their own stuff, which is fantastic, and I really proud of that. And one of the things I'm most proud about is the chance to give you fine people a platform. It's not much of a platform now, but it's going to get bigger. And every time I go to the website, I see 5 or 6 new posts from members, which is refreshing. Once we get these things under control, we're just trying to get to enough members. We have right now, we have one financial mission, which is past surviving to the next month. And that mission is getting Scott full time, because he's just running himself ragged, doing yeoman's work on the website and answering all these customer service questions and dealing with complaints and all the rest of it, and spearheading that whole website shift and all that stuff. And in addition to that, he has to go sell furniture 40 hours a week. So what we would really like would be to have enough members, new members, return members come in so that we could afford to get Scott on this full time. And then after that, we'll see about, doing some other stuff. But it is back to the foundation, and the foundation is me delivering firewalls. So that's what we're going to be doing, by golly. And then hopefully the interviews will appear after that. Steve, I'm confident that we will. No, Scott is not CSR Actual. I'm CSR Actual. CSR 6 Actual. But we can think of something for him. Yeah, back to the basics. Do the work. And if you build it, they will come. That's what I believe, and that's what we're going to be doing. And it's what we have been doing. So we've done Bill Whittle Now for 5 months, something, and haven't missed a show that I'm aware of. So anyway, there we go. Okay, next one I see here is from known miscreant Matt Lloyd, taking time away from loitering in the 8th grade parking lot to write 2 questions, one on top of the other. Well, how about that? Here's the first one. Top man Matthew Lloyd, known miscreant, says, the New Zealand shooter said he did what he did to spark a civil war in America. He was overt about his goals. The far left has continually flaunted the subversion of law and order by letting the Clintons off the hook, the Russia debacle, and now dropping charges against Smollett, to name only a few. It's as if they are daring the right to do something about it. Do you think the agenda of the left is to do one of 2 things, take over inch, by hook or by crook, or to incite the right to civil war so that they will have an excuse to step in with the full weight of the government and declare a permanent state of emergency? It's a pretty good question for a guy who has a bad haircut, Yes, the answer is yes. They're doing all of these things. But as I've said a few times now, I and a few others are becoming more encouraged every day. Right after just after the Mueller report, for example, there's nothing there. It's not that there's nothing in the report. There's nothing that the progressives have. They don't have anything. They have this pathological hatred of Donald Trump, and one of the reasons they hate Trump so much is because he's one of them. He is. When I say one of them, and I'm not trying to say he's a closet Democrat, but he is the kind of guy that they would party with. He's a TV star, and he's a media figure. He's a showman, is what he is, and because of that, he fights them on their level, which is the level upon which you must fight them. And we just don't know how to do that. Without Donald Trump, we just wouldn't know how to do it. So what you basically put out there, Matt, is pretty much the thesis of this latest afterburner, firewall rather. And that is, why would you lie about racially or sexual orientation motivated attacks? Why would you lie about that? But put him aside. He's just an actor. He's just a nut. He's just looking for attention. But when you get into things like the Kavanaugh smear and the whole Mueller investigation, they knew it wasn't true, and they knew it wasn't true because they're the people that planted the story that had the story follow. And when you realize that these things have been done, and I have no doubt in my mind, none, that Christina Blasey Ford is lying. I have no doubt about it. And I've had a number of people, I've looked at a number of videos, I should say, on YouTube, where a number of people who do body language analysis took a look at her and just said, she's lying through her teeth. So you have to ask yourself, if you're going to make that kind of lie about Brett Kavanaugh, you're going to make that kind of lie about Donald Trump and Russian collusion. The simple logic of it is you got to come away with you either knew it was going to be damaging or you didn't. And I don't buy that they didn't know. I don't buy that they didn't know. I think that their hatred for Trump is so strong that they're more than willing to see the country burn for it. And needless to say, I was not a fan of Barack Obama under any means. I don't need a software engineer just right now, Roy. Sorry, I probably will in a short period of time, but right now I think we're okay. Maybe you could contact Scott at info@billwhittle.com, and thank you for the offer. So they tell this lie, and 30, 40, 50% of the population believes it. They believe that Brett Kavanaugh is a rapist. They believe that Donald Trump colluded with the Russians, and there's nothing you can do to change their minds. And it's tearing the country apart. And to the degree that there might be Russian meddling or Chinese meddling in American politics, it's not by posting, false ads. It's by manipulating things so that we only hear the things that we want to hear and the left only hears the things that they want to hear. And every day that goes by, we become more and more certain of our own positions and less willing to take a look at what the evidence is saying, and less willing to, reconsider things or admit we were wrong about things or so on. I'm still waiting for the liberal argument. I swear to God, I am just waiting for somebody to make a compelling argument for progressivism or any segment of progressivism. And it just doesn't, it's not there. It's not there. And I mean that sincerely, I mean, really, sometimes I think about going back in time and talking to my past selves and advice I would give myself when I was, 7 and then at 14 at the Planetarium and 21 in college and, 30s being a limo driver and all the rest of it. I often just as a thought experiment think about what I would say to myself if I were able to go back and do that. And I'd certainly talk a lot more politics than I was thinking at the time. But that thought leads me to think, what would 80-year-old Bill say if he came back 20 years and talked to me now? Because if, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, I'm just saying just as a thought experiment, needless to say. What would I tell myself if I could go back to now after having 20 years more experience? And I have to tell you, I've given this a fair amount of thought. I can't think of anything that would change my fundamental belief in my politics. I'm willing to concede that in this strange world of ours, and we're seeing signs of this, so like I said, I'm willing to concede this aspect of it. Maybe this is conceding most of it. Money doesn't mean what money used to mean. Money doesn't mean it's not money anymore. Ever since it went digital, we owe $25,000 billion to who? Who's going to pay that money? It's never going to get paid. Nobody's going to get that money, and everybody knows it. And the reason it goes on is as long as people are making the interest payments on the money, the people who we owe the money to are they're going on. What are they going to do? Are they going to evict us? I mean, whoever owns this $25 trillion, most of it's owned by the American people in one form or another. But let's just say that, what are they going to do? I mean, if I don't pay my rent at my house, sooner or later, men with uniforms are going to pull up in a car with a funny light on the top, and they're going to move me out of somebody else's house, and that's exactly what they should be doing. Are they going to evict us from America? What happens if the government defaults on that loan? Obviously, most people would say it brings the entire world economic system crashing down. I suspect that's the most likely case. But what I'm beginning to feel is that, and I say feel, the farthest I can think of in terms of changing my mind is the belief that we may have reached a level of productivity and overall general wealth as a society where work and money don't really mean what they used to mean. I mean, the founding fathers went to war over a 1 penny hike on tea. Right now, various government agencies take 50% of what I make, at least that. And every day there's more taxes. And I just got a property tax for property that I don't own. So I have to pay the city of Los Angeles $145. And I look down there and it's like $15 of that money goes to the LA Unified School District, which is the most corrupt, incompetent, liberal bastion in the entire country. So it's nice to know that they're taking money from me, giving it to LAUSD so that they can, inflict higher taxes on me. It's a really great feeling. So I don't see how you make those kind of things. Let me put it to you this way. We years and years talked about the common sense resistance, and common sense has been kind of the linchpin of the stuff I try to do because none of this is new. I didn't invent any of it. None of the problems are new. The Greeks had the same problems we have, and so. Where the hell was I? I hate it when that happens. This idea of destroying the country and stuff. Common sense, common sense, common sense. That's what we've been talking about. And and the decency part came to my consciousness. I became aware of the decency. I like to think the decency was always in there, but I became aware of it very recently. Real recently. I mean, like consciously aware of it as a thing. And that was when we did the show just a month ago, or maybe a little more. We did the right angle on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And you guys see the show, and members see the pre-show show, which is really just a blast. My favorite day, it's my favorite time of the week is the right angle pre-show. I love it. But I get to see the pre-show. I get to see Steve and Scott in private. No one's recording anything. We're just getting ready. We're, literally we're like, putting on shirts and getting water and doing all this other stuff, getting ready to record the right angle backstage show. We do 5 of them. Do right angle backstage, then 3 shows, and then one of us has the member show. We rotate that around. But a couple months ago, not even 6 weeks, maybe something like that. I think it was Scott. He's in the comment section now. Scotty, was it you? Who wanted to do the story about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on TV. And could make a pretty compelling hour-long case that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has done more damage to this country and everything we love than virtually anybody. To say I disagree with her politics is an understatement. I think she's a catastrophe. And has been for 40, 50 years. She's lionized by progressives because she has no respect for the Constitution or any of this stuff. She's just got her agenda. But when we brought that idea for the show, because she's disappeared, she's encased in carbonite someplace, Steve and Scott and I, before we're on camera, we don't have to pretend anything. We don't have to watch what we're saying. We don't do that anyway. But just so you know, I get to see these guys every week, and we were sitting there talking about it and talking about the Ginsburg show, what we're going to do and how we're going to handle it. And Scott and I and Steve all at the same time said, I don't want this person to die, We don't want them to die. I'd like her to retire and have her golden years with her grandchildren. I'd like that very much. But I don't want her to die. I don't want anybody to get hurt. When I talk about this has to be destroyed or that has to be destroyed, I'm talking about an idea. I'm talking about a philosophy. And I think I have a fairly large degree of confidence when I say that if you took a vote among progressives and conservatives as to whether or not in their heart of hearts they really wanted to kill the opposition, I think that the progressives would be outnumbering us on that one anywhere from 5 to 10 to 1. I don't want to hurt these people. I don't want anything bad to happen to them. I just want them to stop shoving bad ideas down our throat. And that's where the decency came in. And that's when I realized, no, that's actually the combination. Common sense and decency. That's the formula. All of this stuff is knowable and doable. Scott brings in these really tough challenges, and he never lets me off the hook. He keeps oh no, you've just contradicted yourself. You see, you contradicted yourself. And it's like, I didn't contradict myself at all. What kind of a hayseed do you think I am? And Scott plays devil's advocate, plays it very well, plays it hard, and we get to test that philosophy against 21st century problems. And you know what? That philosophy holds up really, 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 really well. And then again, when we had the situation with Merlin and his wife getting run over, and Lisa and everybody else putting together prayer groups and stuff, I just said, no. He texted me and said he'd never met people like this. I said, no, me neither. So I'll tell you a little piece of the brutal truth. Okay, this is the brutal truth. I've spent a lot of time around engineers and fighter pilots and military people, and sailors, Navy captains of destroyers and submarines and all this stuff. And I've spent a lot of time around the people that make the world actually work. And like I said, this is going to be a kind of a brutal truth, but here it is. Those people, and I've also spent an awful lot of time around actors and producers and people in show business. The people who are fans of ours and members and all the rest of it, people who really get these principles, are by far the best people I know. And you are far, far better people than the crowd over the hill there. But that crowd over the hill sure is interesting and fun. They are, all of them, nuts. But and virtually all of them are either extroverts or introverts who enjoy playing roles so they can be extroverts. They're just fascinating and fun people to be with. And this is the draw of them. That's basically what the glamour is, Very, very quick and clever and and funny and good looking and I suspect that the reason they became so funny and so good at playing people is because they have a very, very broken childhood. Just, it's just the way it is. I've known a lot of them, and I've never met, I might have one or two exceptions here, but as a general rule, I've never met an actor that I thought, was a normal person who I'd want to, have run in the country or anything, or even run in the post office for that matter. So they have all of this glamour, and the appeal of glamour is phenomenal. It's so hard for me to go see movies because I think George Clooney and Matt Damon, Charlize Theron, are just terrific. And when I watch them in movies, I'm so on their side. And then I have to hear them talking all this nonsense and stuff that's going to bring about the end of the world. And they're so sure of themselves. And it just breaks my heart, It's like, if I didn't care about, it's not that I care about the actors, if I didn't care about their ability to make interesting characters, then it wouldn't bother me, but it bothers the hell out of me. And it's once again. And the worst thing is when you find out that one of these actors who you've liked for a long time is also one of these, libbots. Chris Evans, Captain America, made like some really, really nasty comments about conservatives just a couple weeks ago. And it's like, okay, Got it. Thanks. All right, great. So that's another person I can't go and watch and enjoy. I'm not going to pay. I'm not going to pay. What is his name? The guy who plays the Hulk. You know, it's like, it's really just, it's just heartbreaking. Some people have been asking, is BillWhittle.com under maintenance? It's having a difficulty. Mark Ruffalo, thank you. That we are unaware of. Scotty's been really extraordinarily, I'd say almost, first priority was security. But there have been like strange things going on backstage that are coming from the outside. So having tested this site as long as we did and with as many people as we did, my personal inclination is to think that this is what you get when you open up this kind of work to bidders on Upwork. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying there's been some, I'm not going to say anything about it because I don't want to give anybody a tip off or anything, but there have been some definitely spooky and unexplained things going on backstage behind the public website. It really strange things. And I am not convinced that these are random, and I'm not convinced that they're innocent. So I know we've been having a little bit of problems today, but I can assure you that we have spent months on this, months on the security. Scott has spent the last 3 or 4 weeks inviting more and more people in as beta testers, and we haven't had any problem at all. So I think I really do think that we're I don't want to say. I mean, I don't want to blame a big operation on what could be explained by a cosmic ray or something. But in any event, it's exceedingly unusual and very tough on Scott and me both, because we've been working. So when I say we, I mean he has been working so hard to make this thing bulletproof and easy to use. So I suspect that there's something a little fishy going on. Anyway, we've got somebody who's on the team kind of combing through the thing and looking for little Easter eggs. So we can do a few more. Hey, look, it's known miscreant Matt Lloyd again. Right on top of the other. Is law more important than justice? If the law is subverted to circumvent justice, at what point, if ever, does vigilante justice become not only acceptable but a moral imperative? Well, let's see if I can unpack that. There's obviously a difference. There can be a difference between justice and the law. The law is invented and implemented in order to provide justice. If there was no interest in justice, you wouldn't need the law. You just went up and murdered somebody and you didn't care about whether that was just or not, you wouldn't need any laws. You just go steal whatever you wanted to and hurt whoever you wanted to. And the fact that virtually all people, I talked about this on the Eyewitness to a Massacre, virtually all of us have very deeply held inhibitions against really inflicting pain on people. The percentage of the population, at least of the American population, who could actually torture somebody is just vanishingly small. So ideally, in an ideal world, the law is there to provide justice. That's essentially the only reason that you have the law. And if you believe, as I do, that you can, live an entire life and build an entire society, this is the idea of the Republic, Aurora Republic. Basically, we have 3 laws. Don't hurt anybody, don't take their stuff, and do what you promised to do. And those are the essence of natural law, and we try to make human laws in order to try and bring justice. Now, obviously, justice, if we were just going to kind of walk this thing through, the best thing you can do for justice is to make that person whole. In other words, if somebody steals a new car from you, then they need to return a new car, not your car trashed. They need to return what you had, and then they have to pay the price for having done it in the first place. That's a different issue. But the entire idea of justice is making somebody whole, is providing redress to whatever wrongs they suffered. If somebody you know is murdered, you're never going to get justice. You may get revenge, and you may get, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, and you may get some kind of satisfaction, but nothing is going to bring back that person. And or if something you care about is stolen, and they catch the criminal and he gets 10 years, you could say that's justice, but it still doesn't make you whole. It doesn't put back what was taken from you. So, if the law is subverted to circumvent justice, I know he was talking earlier to me about the Jussie Smollett thing, so let's just use that as a good example. So here's a young, hip, black actor. He's been with Barack Obama in the same swimming pool. I'm sure there were other people there as well. But he's young, he's hip, he's everything that Hollywood is, he's everything that Hollywood thinks the future will be. And he comes out and says that a bunch of white racists wearing MAGA hats, Donald Trump's trademark hat, called him racial slurs, homophobic slurs, and then beat him up. And the entire left was completely incandescent, because here finally was some evidence of what they actually believe. Here finally is some actual evidence of what they think about Trump supporters, conservatives, and all the rest of it. And then you find out that it not only didn't happen, that he paid people to do this in order to gain the only currency that really matters in America on the left. There's only one currency. He makes a lot of money, and he's very famous, and he's a good-looking guy. And so what on earth could somebody like that need? And what the currency that Jussie Smollett was going for, the thing he wanted to steal, was he wanted victimhood. He wanted sympathy. He wanted the red badge of courage, the purple badge of victimhood, whatever it is for the left. So he made up the story so that people would feel sorry for them and generate all the support. It might have been just a business decision, get into contract negotiations, all the rest of it. But the absolute fact is he paid people to do this, and he told a lie. He claimed he never lied, but look, there is... we have a check that Jussie wrote to the people who did it, and we have video of him colluding with them. We have confessions on the part of the two Nigerians who actually did it. He's absolutely guilty. There's no question about it. He's as guilty as OJ was. Absolutely as guilty. And so you think, hey, this is serious. And the Chicago police are saying, yeah, this is a serious charge, and we're going to investigate it. He may go to jail. So what happens? A week or two goes by, and the Chicago police and Jussie's lawyer announce that they didn't have evidence to press charges, and not only that, his record is expunged. So in other words, there is no record of him being arrested, charged, or anything. But they did keep his $10,000 bail bond. Now, if I was innocent, and somebody had accused me of something like that, and then they said to me, Bill, we realize that you're innocent after all. We're going to let you go, but we're going to keep your $10,000. I would say, and $10,000 is nothing to Jussie Smollett. I would say, you're not keeping a penny. You're not going to keep a dime of that money. I'm going to fight you for every single dime of that $10,000. And the reason I'm going to fight you for every single penny of that money that I'm going to get back from you is because if I don't, it's an admission that I'm guilty. I put up put up a bail bond in order to appear in court. And they actually did this. And you agree that it wasn't, that I didn't do it on my own, so I want my money back. So it's obvious he did it. And so what happens? He's in Chicago. Chicago's the most corrupt city in America. He and Barack Obama are great buddies. And it's not that he needed, it's not like he was calling in a favor. It's like the favor called into him. He slandered half the country. He slandered you, slandered me, slandered anybody who supported Donald Trump. He supported anybody who's ever worn a MAGA hat. He said white, straight, conservative Trump supporters called him horrible names and beat him up. It's not true. So he should have gone to jail for that. He should have paid a price for that, but he didn't. The Chicago police just, a couple, 10 days go by, and then they say, well, looks like he didn't do anything, so we're going to wipe his record clean. And we're going to keep the $10,000 that he put on deposit. So it's obvious. So now the question is, what he was getting at, Matt's getting at in his question is what happens when the law is subverted to circumvent justice? Because justice for Jesse Smollett would have been a felony conviction, and if not jail time, then certainly a felony conviction and some form of parole, probation, something like that. He should pay the price for this lie that he's told. But that's not what happened, because he's got political connections and because the left owns the media. And so if the media doesn't report it, it doesn't matter what you and I think. There's no, there's nothing you can do. So the second part of the question is where it gets interesting. If it keeps subverting justice like this and tell lies about Trump with the Mueller report, tell lies about Kavanaugh with Blasey Ford, tell lies that Jesse told. There's a firewall in this somewhere, I think. Then the question becomes, okay, so there is basically two sets of law now. There's law for Republicans and there's law for Democrats. And if you're a Democrat, you can get away with anything. And Hillary Clinton, I'm sure you can get away with murder. And if you're a Republican, you can't. And this situation will not continue. It can't go on forever. Glenn Reynolds says that which cannot go on will not go on. He's absolutely right. So what's going to happen? I don't really know, but I'll tell you one thing. I am very, very, very glad that we're the guys with the guns. Very, 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 very glad about that. That's kind of the, we would have been under the wheels of the bus a long time ago, if it weren't for that. Because they would simply do what they wanted to do, and they would just say, well, what are you going to do about it? Now, we haven't done anything about it. We just let it continue, and the more we let it continue, the worse it gets. But ultimately, there is a check to the will of these progressive control freak weenies. And that check to their desires is an armed population that is heavily armed. This gets their attention, which is why they're calling constantly for gun control instead of crime control. They're not, when they say gun control, they're not trying to prevent massacres, and they're not trying to make their neighborhoods safer. What they really want to do is they want to disarm the law-abiding citizens of this country so they can do what they want to and get away with it. But it's a little late for that. So every time you buy a weapon, and if you are going to buy a weapon, it's an adult decision, and you need to be an adult, and you're responsible for what happens with that weapon. But since you are adult and you are responsible, every time you buy a weapon, a little bell goes off in heaven, because it's another blockade. It's another It's another barrier to tyranny, and they can't get their way around this. This really has got them pretty much stopped. And thank God. There, I just realized, what it really comes down to, Matt, what you're seeing when you see Hillary Clinton get off, and you see Comey get off, and you see Barack Obama get away with this stuff, and no consequences for Benghazi, and nobody goes to jail over Jussie Smollett, nobody goes to jail over Hillary's emails, nobody goes to jail. There's a separate set of justice. What you come away with is how do I put this? What you come away with is you realize that what is driving this psychologically for them is that they are in fact a genetic mutation, or maybe we're the genetic mutation, more likely, because this kind of people have been with us forever. But they're people who have to tell other people what to do. And in other times in history, these people would have been dukes or earls or shahs or whatever. I know most of them are incompetent, so they would have worked in the bureaucracy of the shah or the emir or the whatever, the king. They're not only determined to tell people what to do, they have a burning desire to exercise control over people and to ride in a better car. And there's no other way to explain what happens in San Francisco. San Francisco, arguably the most beautiful city in the world, has reeking piles of human excrement on the sidewalk, and it's not that they're out of money. So what is driving this? It's actually happening. You've got a progressive mayor, and you had Gavin Newsom before. He's now governor. He's going to do to the whole state what he did to San Francisco. So why is it happening? Why would the progressives have their own city, arguably the most progressive city in America? Maybe Portland is neck and neck now. But why would the most progressive city in America be willing to allow human excrement and drug needles on the streets? Why? You would think that if you're a progressive and you're taking the kind of tax money from people like me that they take, you would think that you would make San Francisco a model city. You would think if you were a progressive and you had the kind of money that the progressives have, San Francisco would be the cleanest, safest city in the world. It'd be a showpiece for their philosophy. Well, as it turns out, it is a showpiece for their philosophy. And the human waste on the streets and people basically, just taking a crap on the sidewalk, that is an advertisement for their philosophy. And here's where you really will begin to understand these people. They'll tell you that they want equality and that they want, that they don't want anybody doing better than anybody else. But the only explanation I can come up with for having San Francisco in that state is that on some level, Gavin Newsom, as mayor of that town, really needs to be the guy who's not walking through human shit. That's what it comes down to. He needs to be. Thank you, Scotty. He needs to be above it. He needs, since this country is so wealthy and this country is so prosperous and safe, how the hell are you going to be better than everybody else, noticeably better than everybody else, if everybody else is doing well? In other words, if you had a prosperous and clean San Francisco, how the hell would you know that you were Gavin Newsom, the mayor of San Francisco? The way he knows he's the mayor is that he's going around in a limousine and the rest of the peasants are walking through human filth. And that increases the gap between that progressive and the hoi polloi, which is what he's terrified of. He's not terrified of the people because they're going to hurt him, because he knows that we won't hurt them. But what these people are terrified of is they're terrified of being normal. They're terrified of being seen as the same. They're terrified of. It's funny that these progressives, what they're really terrified of is real democracy and real equality. That's what just scares the hell out of them. And they're terrified because they know that they can't do these things. They know that they will never, ever. Gavin Newsom, or take Jerry Brown. Jerry Brown or Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton would never, ever, ever be heard of, and they would have no money, no recognition, no nothing if they had not gone into politics. Bill Clinton, on the other hand, if Bill Clinton didn't go into politics, I think Bill Clinton would have become an extremely successful car salesman. I think he would be I think Clinton Ford would own Arkansas, and he'd be making millions and millions of dollars a year and chasing all these girls around. He'd be perfectly happy because Bill Clinton would make a great car salesman. He was not a great administrator. Doesn't have to be. Bill Clinton's the kind of guy that makes anybody feel happy and comfortable. And you walk into Clinton Ford and you're going to shake hands with Bill, and Bill's going to make you feel like you want to buy a car there, and he would become successful. But most all of them, what would Hillary Clinton ever do? Hillary Clinton's destiny outside of politics would be to she would retire as an upper-level manager, mid-level manager at an insurance company. And her entire worth would be that she spent 35 years snooping into people's business to make sure that everybody was doing their job and that they were getting their money's worth. That's it. That's what they are. I see people, and we all feel this way. When we see somebody go by in a nice car, a progressive said, no one should have a car like that. And a conservative says, everyone should have a car like that. I certainly want a car like that, and I'm going to get one. And so you get down to the psychology of them. It's all about not just moral superiority. That's what I've been saying for 10 years, the unearned moral superiority. When I started thinking about Chicago, I realized it's not just moral superiority. They have physical superiority. There is no excrement on their shoes the way there is on the shoes of the people who are not Jerry Brown or his friends or at their cocktail parties. Those people are down in the street walking in the filth. But we don't have to do that because we are special. These elitists, you have to be a certain level of stupid and arrogant in order to get to this place. You have to, and venal too. You've got to have an absence of morality that tells you my success is going to come at the price of taking things away from other people. And then you have to have the arrogance to think that you deserve all of these things when in point of fact you don't produce or do anything. And finally, you have to have you have to be stupid enough to not be able to be successful any other way. Why do you think that politics and politicians are despised in American society and despised in British society and probably not French society? That's all you need to know about the French. Why is it that politicians are despised everywhere? That people, going back to the Romans, the Greeks, that anybody who was running for office, automatically, you can find reports of this back in Smyrna, 2000 BC. You find that the people that run for office, that want to be elected officials, have no moral character. They're willing to say whatever they need to say to get into that position. And when they get into that position, they act like lords because they always want to be lords, but they're not smart enough or willing to work hard enough to actually do it. So they do it by force. They do it by the force of the state. They're awful people. And they're destroying this country. We're not telling lies about Barack Obama. And by the way, I wandered around this, but this was the point I wanted to make earlier when we were talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think Barack Obama was a horrible catastrophe for the country. And if it turned out there was some news that would in fact have gotten Barack Obama impeached, I'd have been all for it. But if I was told that if I told a lie, that would get Barack Obama impeached, how could you do that? Here you go, Bill. Here's a story. We've got all of this evidence. It's airtight. It's manufactured, but it's airtight. Here's your chance to knock him off of his throne, and not just for the personal satisfaction, but think of all the harm he's doing to the country and all the harm he's doing to our soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen and Coast Guardsmen. All of the good you could do. Just tell this lie about Barack Obama. You'll not get caught, and you'll get rid of him. And I swear to God, if I was faced with a choice of an airtight, absolutely guaranteed, by God, 100% opportunity to get that guy out of office through a lie, or not, I would take the not. You know, I have to live with myself. I don't just have to live with myself. I have to live up to my wife, and that's a pretty high bar, and so who could do that? There's nobody watching the show. Certainly nobody been watching the show for 2 hours anyway. Who could do that? It's not possible. You wouldn't do it. And that is a moral distinction between us and them. They don't care about lying about us if they get political power. And we think that no power is worth the destruction of your integrity and your honor and all that other stuff, which means that it's so obvious that it's so obvious that it's hard to see. When you keep asking for the motive, why would they do that? Don't they recognize that they're ruining the state of California? They do recognize it. They don't care. And we're just astonished. How could somebody do this? How could Blasey Ford lie about this? She's destroying a man's life. She's destroying his life. I mean, I got called a racist by an online outlet of George Soros, and it went through me like a red hot spear. Can you imagine what Kavanaugh must go through now? The entire world and half of the country is convinced he committed this heinous act. Who can do that to people? I mean, what does that say about your desire for power, and what does it say about your moral core that you'd be willing to do that? And the answer is very simple. We can't understand them. We try to look for a reason. We try to think of some Machiavellian kind of reason why they're doing this, but no, we don't need any of that. We can't understand them because they have no honor. They have no sense of right and wrong. They have no, well, they do, but the right and wrong is good for me, right, bad for me, wrong. There is no moral code. When you start thinking about how could they possibly face themselves? How could Blasey Ford, tell a lie like that? Doesn't she think about the family of the people and that she's lying about? No, she doesn't. She doesn't care. She does care about leftism, but she doesn't care about that. And I'm telling you, and I know this to be a certain moral fact, if I had the chance to do to Barack Obama or Ruth Bader Ginsburg or AOC or anything, if I had the opportunity to tell a lie that would destroy their political career, how could I do that? And this is how they succeed. They succeed because they don't have any rules to play by. It's not that they don't play by the rules. There are no rules to play by. This is another important thing you need to understand about the left, because we always look at them and we think, my God, they're breaking the fundamental laws of society. They're lying, they're cheating, they're saying one thing and doing another. They're breaking the rules. They don't have any rules. There are no rules to break. Rules, for them, are stuff that suckers do. And rules are what limit successful people. And so therefore, All we have to do as leftists is control the rules. If we control the rules, then conservatives or honest people will follow the rules. Even if they don't like the rules, they'll follow them because they're the rules, because they're the law. So they realize, okay, I don't have any restrictions on my behavior. I'll do whatever I have to. Once I achieve political power, I'll be able to make the rules, and then those other people, those conservative sons of bitches, they will do what I want them to because those people follow the rules. So all I have to do is get my hands on how to make the rules, and at that point, ching ching, now all of a sudden you understand Maxine Waters and you understand Nancy Pelosi. You understand, well, Pelosi probably was smart enough to do better. She married into hundreds of millions of dollars. But you certainly understand Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and you understand Beto O'Rourke. You understand all of it. When you understand that they have no honor to violate, that they do not have guilty consciences because there's no guilt. There's no feeling of guilt. That what they want is they want to be able to control the rules because half of the country lives by rules and the other half agrees with them. So pretty simple. That's basically it. And we put up with it. We put up with it because of our love for law. And that's why if the Democrats had tried to take over the White House in a military coup, we would have beaten the police there. You know, we would have had those people covered in feathers and tar and on a rail before the cops arrived, because that would have been a clearly illegal act. But by doing things that seem legal, like winning elections, and there's so much evidence of election fraud. Why do we put up with it? What is it that keeps us quiet? I heard from somebody who said in local politics, somebody said something like, the night of the election in Orange County, I'm just talking about city councils and very low-level political offices. The night of the election, after the polls had closed and they'd done the count, we were ahead by either a noticeable margin or a wide margin on 14 seats, and a week later, all 14 of those seats had been lost to Democrats because the Democrats just kept finding votes. Why don't we do anything about this? There's an answer. Why don't we do anything about it? Why don't we say, hey, I don't care if those votes were generated by nothing but Congressional Medal of Honor winners. Voting is an act. It's a procedure. They didn't get their votes in on time, therefore their votes are nullified. I know they practically gave their lives for this freedom, but they also knew that the polls closed at 7 and the votes didn't get there in time, and so they don't count. Why don't we just do that? We don't do it because we're good people. And one thing, it's all peer pressure. We don't want to be thought of as bad people. We will put up with anything, next to anything, because we don't want to be thought of as bad people. It's very, very, very powerful. Very powerful for us. And they understand as long as they can hide behind the law, we won't do jack. Because we have restrictions on our behavior. And we have restrictions on our behavior because we're successful, because we're competitors, and because we don't want to eat the poor, So we have limitations on our behavior because we can do pretty much whatever we want to. These people who can't do anything have no limitations on their behavior, and they think that limits and rules are for suckers. And that's what we've been doing, is we've been playing suckers. But, and this is not a trivial thing, we have allowed them to get away with this, and we've been played for saps and suckers. But we haven't given up our souls over it, We still cast a reflection, and there's an awful lot to be gained by that. Edward Smith just made a comment, and I'm not really repeating it, but it reminds me of something that's crystal clear to me. A liberal is somebody who would rather do something that felt and looked good but caused actual harm. And a conservative is somebody who's willing to do something that looks bad and does actual good. So, anyway, that's that. We'll do one more. How's that sound? I'm getting hungry. I'm going to go home and have some. I might have some baked beans, barbecue baked beans with bacon. It's awfully good, you know. Oh, it's awfully good. If you've ever been out around a campfire, you know what I mean. You ever been out? I mean, I don't do a lot of camping. I've been camping twice, I think. One time I have a very good friend, my oldest friend, Fritz, who I've known for half a century now. And he was into World War I reenactment many years ago, 20 years ago. And these World War I reenactors, had this property a long way out of town. You had to drive for 2 hours. This giant piece of property. And on that property, they dug trenches. And they dug dugouts. Excuse me. And there was no man's land and barbed wire. And there were, they would plant little puff charges to make sure of, so they could run through the middle of the night, be 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm down there. I'm wearing a German uniform. I'm not wearing a Wehrmacht uniform. I'm not wearing a Nazi helmet, but I'm wearing a German helmet, and I've got a Gewehr in my hand, and I'm firing blanks at other idiots. And it was an all-night thing, and it was cold. And being an American in the 21st century, I am not used to being uncomfortable. But there's something to be said for it. So we were in this dugout, and things were quiet, and there were like guards. We had our guys watching no man's land, and we'd been running around, physically moving around, doing this idiocy for hours and hours and hours. And what they brought, what dinner consisted of was a trench dinner. They came in with a piece of with a big hunk of French bread, a giant nasty salami, and a big piece of cheese, and some water, some warm water. And you could cut that bread and put a big thick slice of that salami on it, cut a wedge of cheese, put that all together, and take a bite out of that. And I swear I have not ever experienced anything more delicious in my life. It was just unspeakably delicious. So there's a lot to be said for this. People wonder why bad things happen to us. You know, it's like, well, bad things happen to us because if they didn't, we wouldn't appreciate the good things. And when bad things happen to you, it takes a certain level of pain to experience this. And I don't know that many people get there, but when you have had enough of this beaten into you, you realize that when something bad is happening to you, like, losing a lot of your members, you realize that's a lesson, and you realize that it's being done to you because God loves you, because if he didn't, he would not waste his time putting all of these obstacles in your way in order to toughen you up and to increase your skill level. And basically it's like what he's doing is he's running you through the simulator. He's given you big problems, but not fatal problems. And when you solve those big problems or go through the pain of them one way or another, you end up stronger. And that's why we have bad things happen to us, because we're very dear, and this is how you build strong people. Okay, Chris Taylor is going to do it. Chivalry meant boys were expected to make frequent small sacrifices for the benefit of, quote, the weaker sex, unquote. When almost all positions of authority went to men, that meant that almost all leaders had from childhood daily exposure to the idea of power coming with responsibilities to the less powerful. Now that women are frequently in and abusing positions of power, how should chivalry be reinvented so that they too will have the ideas of honor and leadership responsibility drilled into them from childhood? That's a great question. I'll give you my immediate reaction to that, Chris, and it's not a flattering one. But I have seen and talked many, many times about how this onslaught in Star Wars and video games and all of this. In other words, I've seen so many cases of these little tiny women beating up these big men in movies and video games and TV that now, and for many years, 10, 20 years now, I'm seeing women as violent and as prone to fistfights as men used to be. And when I watch women taunting men, and when I say taunting them, I don't mean just speaking at them. You get in a political argument on the street or something, and this young progressive woman, is pushing you, and starts hitting you in the face. My first reaction is, if you do that again, I'm going to knock you to the ground. And I'm telling you now. And she would do it again because she's convinced she's as strong as I am. And at that point, I really got to tell you, after 2 warnings, I think I just knock them out because they don't deserve. They don't deserve that inhibition that other women deserve. She thinks that you want to solve this problem with violence. You think you're real tough. I don't want to really end on this because it really does make me sound misogynistic, and I'm not. We were talking about Axonar, that Star Trek thing last week, and how that woman commander was great. I see women helicopter pilots in the Navy. The damage control officer on board the USS Spruance DDG 111 when I was aboard was a young woman who I had utter confidence in. But the fact of the matter is, I think you could take virtually any random room of 50 people, 100 people, 50 men and 50 women. And I think as long as we're not talking about people who are, very, very old or very, very young. I mean, if you took 100 people between the ages of 20 and 60, 50 of them men, 50 of them women, I don't think there's one woman that could hurt the weakest man. But I think the weakest man could definitely hurt the fittest woman. And it's not, it's just, look, muscle strength is determined by muscle cross-section. That's it. That's it. The more strands you have, the stronger you are. And when men have arms that are twice as thick as women's arms, or many times more thick, then Cheryl says a better option would be to walk away in that situation, never hit women. I agree about never hitting women. I agree about walking away. But I've seen these people, as you try to walk away, I've seen them run in front of you and start pushing you and hitting you in the face. Comes a point when it's like, okay. Never hit a woman is not what I believe anymore. Now it's never hit a lady. If they really need to be convinced for this, then okay, there's a warning. Here comes another warning. Did everybody get that warning on camera? I'm not going to continue to sit here and be hit in the face by this lunatic who will not let me make a graceful retreat. I'm not going to just sit here and be pummeled by this person who will not let me walk away. So here it comes. And I'm not going to give him everything I got. A friend of mine was really right on this topic. He was in a judo class or karate or something. He was probably 16, 17, so puberty's already happened. He was in this judo class, and because it was so progressive, they put him in to fight against this woman. And she did something like she smacked him in the face or something a little more than just landed a hit on him. There was some I don't know if there was some taunting or celebration or something like this, but whatever happened was it made my friend mad enough. So this woman in this karate match has been landing all these punches and kicks on this guy, and she's just really getting cocky and bragging and talking about all this other stuff. And finally, my friend got so mad that he put that whole thing aside, and he hit her with an open palm right in the solar plexus, and knocked her 20 feet back. And I've seen this. I've seen this on so many videos. I've seen so many times these women picking a physical fight with men and not letting them get away. Honest to God, you can watch these guys going, just get off of me, just leave me alone, and just not leaving them alone. It's like watching, piranha fish. They just won't leave you. And finally, they pushed this guy to the limit. I think wife beaters should be taken out and beaten with bats. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about being assaulted by women. And I have seen in every single one of these cases where that man finally has had enough and hits back, the expression is always one of absolute astonishment on the part of the women. You can tell they're hurting, and you can tell that that they're emotionally upset. But the one expression that you will see on the faces of women who think that they can, just keep hitting men and beat them up, is astonishment. And it's an astonishment at the actual power of male musculature and skeletal system. I think the skinniest 15-year-old boy can lift suitcases that virtually no women can lift. I had a female trainer who's in phenomenal shape, and she was a Muay Thai fighter, and I'm sure that person could kick my ass. But that's because she's in the gym 5 hours a day. As a general rule, it's just really astonishing. And since nobody does physical work anymore, nobody in this society, certainly in Santa Monica, nobody in Santa Monica, no progressives ever do physical work. I never really realized it until I said it, but it's actually pretty much true. I've never known a progressive who actually did physical work. They've all had intellectual work, working with their mouth or their fingers or their actions or whatever. They've never done physical work because if you have to do physical work, like if you live on a farm, you will find out that men are stronger than women, and you will find this out on a daily basis. There's a lot to be said for some of this being closer to nature. It's really astonishing. And I remember, I was thin as a rail. I was 6'1". I'm still 6'1". I weighed 119 pounds when I was in college because I was hungry and I was poor. Really, couldn't afford to eat today poor for a long time. And I remember even then, when I was built like a twig, some girl in the theater department challenged me to a arm wrestling match. And I remember thinking, okay, well, here we go. I hope I don't embarrass myself. And they started, and me with my stick arms, it's like, I could end this right now. And because I'm a bit of a bastard, once I realized that she was putting everything she had into this, everything she had, I was sort of like this, and then I just kind of, and you can feel it. You can feel it. She's just about to win. She's so sure. And I let myself get down to the point where my arm was almost touching the table, and then I just looked at her and I said, "You done now?" Like that, and a small victory for Bobby Riggs. That's what it was. Anyway, I think that'll do it. It's 8:30, 2.5 hours of loveliness. And I'm hungry and I want to go home. It's nice to have a home to go to. When you have a home to go to, you find out that you stop doing things that I used to do, like driving fast in traffic and flying experimental airplanes upside down. Because you got someplace to go now. You got someplace to be. So that'll do it. What was that? Who used to sign off by saying it was Jimmy Durante, wasn't he? Good night, Mrs. Something, or wherever you are. Something. Anyway, I've been trying to get Natasha to come and do the show, and she's always got an excellent excuse. But I think now would be a good time to flood the comment section because I'm sure she's watching. and convince her that that the one thing you want more than anything in the world is to be able to ask her questions about yours truly, because she'll answer you honestly, and you know the power that would have. It'd be like having a magic ring. So, Mrs. Calabash, good night, Mrs. Calabash, or wherever you are. That's right. So, if you want to make an appeal to my charming wife and you're watching this live on Twitch, you probably can do it in the comment section right now. She's turning pink and now red as we speak. But now's your chance. And that'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge, brought to you by the paying members of BillWhittle.com, who now, I can say with some confidence, for your measly $9.95 a month, you will receive 20 right angle shows, 20 Bill Whittle Now shows, and 4 firewalls, and that's every single month. Sounds like a bargain to me. I'll tell you one last thing on this subject. We certainly want to get our members back and all the rest of this stuff, but and I am the model businessman to the extent that I should be put under a glass jar and watch carefully and tell everybody to watch me as closely as they can and do the exact opposite of everything I do in business. So all of that, but I am astonishingly proud of the fact that we put out as much content, nearly as much content as organizations that have 75 employees, and we have 3 beside me, 3 part-time people. We're putting out, what is that? A guaranteed minimum of 45 shows every single month. That's a decent year, for some people. 45 shows would be one a week with some time off, but we put out 45 shows a month, and we do it because of you. So thanks to all the members, and thanks to the non-members as well. You're people too, I suppose. And I don't see any reason why we will not be back here next Thursday night, by the way. Coming up, so we should be able to do the show next Thursday, but 2 days after that, on the 6th, is Natasha's birthday, and the very next day, on the 7th, is my birthday, and Uptick Mick says, good night, quit talking, Bill. That's good advice. I think so. So I'll quit talking now. We will see you hopefully next week right here on your very own member-produced Stratosphere Lounge. Take care now. Bye-bye.